Hello, welcome to the 2017 Collab 365 Global Conference Session, Landmines in the Cloud, a CIO's Navigational Assistance. I'm Shelley Lindhorst, Client Services Manager for fpweb.net, reborn as US Cloud. With me today is our Vice President of Technology, Jeremy Vance. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you, Shelley. So I first want to introduce myself. I've been around the IT industry for about 20 plus years now. I've been in a variety of leadership positions and roles, both as a producer of services for cloud and also consumer services for cloud. I've served as an IT director for a cloud company before, and also as CIO at Pabst Brewing Company at one time. So when we're considering cloud strategy, it's important to consider the business and the technology impacts together. That's probably the biggest area there. When adopting a cloud strategy, how do you fit these things in your overall enterprise architecture? And really, how do you make that fit? Cloud services are an important tool. I don't want to dismiss that, but there are a lot of things you need to make sure you think about just because you're adopting cloud. Additionally, with cloud, there are a lot of things that can happen with outside of IT that you have to be aware of that can impact your business. So today we'll talk about really 5 different key things. First, we'll talk about some general cloud terms, really how you go about thinking about the cloud and how that impacts enterprise. I want to talk about some of the financial impacts and accounting impacts when you're adopting cloud services. People sometimes don't think about that from a business perspective. Then on the technology side, kind of digging deeper into just what does the impact on your network with cloud mean? I mean, that's probably a big area with the business that people do not think about is I'm going to the cloud, but they don't make changes on the network side. And finally, the next area would be, okay, I'm going to the cloud. What about my applications? Are they ready to go to the cloud? What are some things I need to think about on those applications or where they're going to go? And finally, probably the biggest piece on people's concerns with cloud is around security. And what are those considerations you need to make sure you're looking at when you're going to the cloud and how you're accounting for that and what are the impacts it can have on your business. So that's kind of our agenda for today.
All right, sounds great. So let's start by defining some terms in regards to general knowledge of the cloud and technology.
So probably the first and foremost thing is people say we're in the cloud. And when really they're not in the cloud, they're in the clouds. People are actually part of multiple clouds. I think it's about 70% of all organizations today are using multiple cloud service providers in their business, either through microservices, infrastructure, platform as a service, those types of things. So it's important to think about those. Additionally, you have a mix of cloud things you're doing. You might be using software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platforms as a service. And those all have different nuances of how they fit in your infrastructure. Your line of business guys probably out there buying software as a service applications to support your business. Salesforce.com apps, HubSpot, some big ones out there like that. They may be leveraging Dropbox, Box, those types of solutions that the business has picked up and started using. Additionally, you have platforms as a service. You may be buying low-code, no-code platforms. OutSystems is a big player out there as an example for that helps you do rapid application development, build things. Shopify is really more of an e-commerce platform, another cloud player to keep you out of the business of doing things for that. And finally, you have infrastructure as a service, which is probably the biggest noise and biggest discussions always out there. That's your AWS, that's your Azure, that's your Google Cloud platform. They're basically providing infrastructure to kind of run your business for that. And then finally, with cloud, you have a mix of that. You could have public stuff, you could have private stuff, and you could even have a hybrid where I have some components in the public cloud and some stuff in the private cloud. I may be using SharePoint Online as an example for all of my SharePoint infrastructure and everything for an application for collaboration. However, I have legacy applications on Access web apps I've built, and I've needed to migrate those off into a private cloud because of support changes in SharePoint Online and run that. So those are things to think about there for that. So with that, one of the big things with cloud is it's going to have impacts on your process. People talk about technology. They tend to forget it's really a systems discussion. It's people, process, and technology coming together to deliver results. So you have to think about how things like continuous upgrades are going to impact your business. Change management, release management. I can give you stories. One case of Shopify at one time where I was working in a previous experience, making subtle changes to their APIs over time. Well, if we weren't watching Shopify's forums and their release notes for when they were making those API changes, it would have caused issues with back-end services. And we did have problems with that where the back-end service also was not ready to support that change. And we had to make changes to that so the business could continue to flow. For that. So it requires you to kind of really monitor what the release plans of these cloud applications are, because they are releasing more frequently and faster in a continuous manner that you have to continually update. The other area you have to look at is, do you have a defined risk management area, a defined risk management policy and capability? You need to have ability to quantify an impact on your business. Let's just look at Amazon as an example. You've had 2 big S3 outages this year. You had a couple S3 outages year before. You even have S3 outages going all the way back to 2011 for things. If you're using a service in the cloud and it's key to running your business, it can have a huge impact. The S3 outage back in 2011 affected a very large video provider, and that caused them to miss subscriptions. It happened on a key day of the year where they were trying to launch a service, and people could not enroll in all that. That helps your overall customer growth. And you have to think about how that's going to affect your business. So you may have adopted a cloud service, but it's key to your business, and it affects that. Which kind of leads me to the other area with that is, you've adopted a cloud service, you're using it for a while, but it may be kind of hard to undo that service. So you need to think about that. Once you've invested in cloud, the cost of repatriating your data could be anywhere from 5 to 7 times the cost of what it costs to get you into the cloud, which is huge. Because then you also think about, you move to the cloud, all the people, the process, the technology that you were able to either reallocate or eliminate, and usually it's been eliminate, but reallocate those resources. Now you have to allocate those resources back to your on-prem business. So you need to make sure you consider all that when you're making moves.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's great. So 5 to 7 times expense is certainly going to grab the attention of anyone watching with budgetary control. Let's dig deeper in the impacts of financials and accounting.
Yeah, so having a total cost of ownership view is very important with cloud. Gartner has a survey they've put out there that says for every dollar you spent on the ideation and concept of coming up with a cloud service and getting it kind of prototyped, it's probably going to cost you about up to $7 to actually get it fully deployed in the organization. What is that $7 spent on? That's either more detailed design, the implementation, the integration, the operationalizing and managing that. You've bought a cloud service, somebody set it up, it worked good for the department, but it wasn't really set up for the entire enterprise. So you need to take a step back and maybe undo that data and redo that data to fit your enterprise needs with that. Same thing you see in SharePoint sites as an example over time. As your enterprise changes, you kind of have to continually maybe go back and touch your information architecture. What was done in a prototype may not be ready to scale for that. So you need to consider all that and weigh in on that, because people have their processes and they have to make sure the stuff will fit. The other piece to consider, which is actually a good one, really from a financial perspective, is there's some new accounting rules that have come out that are being communicated, we're seeing out there, on how leases are treated. So multi-year leases are going to be allowed to be depreciated and capitalized, which that's cool. Because now what was truly just an OPEX expense year over year, you can actually capitalize and treat it as a CAPEX expense. So that'll have some tax advantages potentially for an enterprise and how you consider stuff. Maybe you want to sign that multi-year agreement with a service provider you're comfortable with for that, because you can get some tax advantages out of that.
Right.
The other area is, and we'll talk a bit in more detail, is measuring utilization. Do you have an accurate count of how many users you have using your systems? Do you know those license numbers? You've rolled something out, you thought it was only 15 users, but you come back later and find out, no, it's actually 100 users using this or 300 users using this service. And all of a sudden that annual bill you thought was $20,000 a year is now $90,000 a year.
Right.
So it's pretty expensive because of the adoption, and you didn't plan for that. So that's a key thing to think about there. The other area with the utilization is make sure you really understand what your peak loads and what your average loads are. A lot of people will buy sites and they plan it for the worst case scenario, because that's what you do when you're in an enterprise behind the firewall. I can only buy servers once, so I buy everything I need for the worst case scenario or for growth 5 years from now. Well, with cloud, you don't have to do that. That's an important piece. Buy what you need now. You can always add more later. Don't overfill the buffet plate. Even on multi-year agreements, most of your providers always let you add more. You can always make that change and make that return the agreement and continue forward for that. So that kind of builds off that lease piece a little bit. But probably the bigger one that most people don't think about is meeting your annual audit requirements. If you're an industry that's regulated, you're publicly traded, you have SOX requirements, you have PCI requirements. And I was specifically thinking of the SOX requirements. You've chosen a cloud application. It's critical to your business. So how do you pick which applications are within SOX scope? It has a material impact. So you've picked this application and you're using it like Salesforce or some other CRM application. And that drives your opportunity and lead management, which drives your ability to sell and close. Are you treating that application with the same diligence and respect you treat your ERP application that's managing your financials? And that's a big one there for you. You really have to take these applications to that level for managing that. So there's some business stuff to consider.
Yeah, definitely. That's some great information around the financials of it. Okay, so let's shift from the business concerns to the technical concerns.
Yes, that's a good area to go to. So probably the first and foremost thing with the cloud, and I've actually seen this, is people will say, I'm going to move all of this to the cloud. I'm going to cut having these servers in my house and having to maintain a file server, or I'm going to, I won't have to manage email on premise anymore. They move all that stuff to the cloud, but then they don't upgrade their network pipes. So all of a sudden, what you thought was pretty good performance, and your network was running pretty well at a 20 megabit connection, well, you may now actually need to have 150, 200 megabit connections to support your usage going across that wide area network. And sometimes people don't think about that, which kind of drives you to your next thing is you got to really think about, is your service provider got the right speed and size to handle that, latency and bandwidth. So different connections or have different latency. So latency is at how much pressure you can put on the water pipe, how fast can you move the water through, versus the bandwidth is how much water you can move through at a given time. So that's a big area to think about. So you may need to actually upgrade and make investments with your local provider on fiber build-outs and stuff, which could have significant investment and cost or lease commitments for years there. Additionally, you may also think about your edge network strategy with your branches. If you have a multi-office location, you may need to upgrade your network infrastructure. So you may be needing to buy more edge routers, more firewalls, and more edge protection devices. Look at how you do your VPN architecture with point-to-point tunnels and change all that. So there's big areas you've got to really consider as the network piece. The other area is with the cloud is your WAN latency. Because now you've moved things across the globe, and all of us have done the phone calls in the past where you're calling somebody overseas and you can hear the wait in the phone because of the time it just takes the stuff to travel. Speed of light is the speed of light there. I don't know if anybody's ever talked on a satellite phone. You can really hear the delays on sat phones for that with there. But you may have an application that may have worked fine on the enterprise LAN and that was built for the enterprise LAN may not be ready for the wide area network, much less a cloud wide area network. So you may need to think about how you invest and interconnect that part. So again, more increase there on network spend. And that's typically what you will see. The other pieces are some applications just don't lend themselves to the wide area network, so you may have to make investments in VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, and a large investment in that. You may have to make investments of having VDI for these sets of applications that are in this data center that are in the cloud versus these sets of applications in another data center because of just how they are. And hopefully you can get the same VDI in both locations, but you may also have two types of VDI. You may have people using Citrix solution versus a Microsoft remote desktop solution for access. And there's some user differences in that. So you need to think about how you're going to educate and train the users and manage on that. So applications are a concern.
So you've touched on application performance. What about the applications themselves?
So we talked about the applications a little more. So the latency in the network applications can actually cause you to may have to rework an application. As an example, a lot of people programming, they like to use linked servers with the databases. Those linked servers, they'll just write a straight query. I'm going to select from this server over here. And it's all great and good when you're on a 1 gigabit 10 gigabit LAN on the same server, same infrastructure, and all that. You've now moved that linked server across the pond to another location or even across the state to another location. And you may need to go back and rework your queries to adjust how you're doing the workload and where the workload occurs. So there may be some internal application plumbing you have to do. The other one is sometimes applications, and even though it is 2017, things still get hard-coded into applications, either this URL or this specific path or this specific port of how we connect. you may need to think about how your applications can be rebuilt to use a service registry. We talked big about service registries back in the 2000s when we were doing the whole service-oriented architecture. That may still need to be there. You may need to think about how that fits into your enterprise strategy so that you can enlist and de-enlist applications as they move across the cloud from cloud A to cloud B with a different fully qualified domain name or network operation. And finally, on the applications themselves, you need to really think about the security of them, how they run. Because you've pushed things out of either outside your control and you have a third party managing that or some other piece there, you need to think about, are your applications ready to take advantage of a claims-based, distributed security type model? There's different SAML architectures out there. We're on different SAML standards over the years for security assertion markup language. And you really need to think about how you make these applications work in that distributed environment. When you terminate an employee and you want to cut off access, are you ready to cut off access to all these employees, or did you forget to turn this off? If you have an employee that's done a bring your own device type thing, or a bring your own service a little bit in this day and age, and they've put a service on their device, did you get that service off their device, or did you leave a service hole open in your network?
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So now that we're talking about security a little bit, let's dive a little deeper into that, beyond authentication, rights management, and patching.
Yes. Yeah. So probably the foremost thing in security is making sure you have a good understanding of what all you have out there and who's using what. That's probably the biggest one. To either determine what your security strategies, you need to have that complete and accurate inventory. Mm-hmm. I will tell you, in most enterprises, it's hard to maintain that inventory when it's just inside your firewall, inside your network, when you know it's just IT making those developments and just on your IT staff, especially as you get into more complex IT organizations. When you start introducing all these cloud services, you may have departments out there that have picked and enlisted stuff and purchased it on their expense accounts, on their budgets, and you do not know about it. And you do not even know how many users are using that and where they're being used. So having a way to get that inventory and have that discovery is there. So you need to really look at your network traffic, your throughput monitoring, understand where users are going and where they're connecting. Is very important. So that's probably the biggest one there.
Okay.
That inventory is big.
Mm-hmm. Right. So is there a difference between on-prem security and cloud security strategy?
Yes. Probably the biggest one is you have to start thinking about your network perimeter. In the cloud, the perimeter has changed. Mm-hmm. So it used to be we used to layer firewalls, right? Layers of security. I'd have a Bastion firewall. I'd have a DMZ firewall. I would have different tiers in the network. Well, because of the cloud, it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I may have to give up doing layer security and maybe move to more of a point security strategy where I have my hosts and individual machines actually configured to secure themselves. You need to look at, be able to clearly look and understand what your network rules are, your firewall rules, analyze that, understand the pathing of how that goes. Understand how your data gets from one thing to another thing for that. And it becomes very complex. Large enterprises are familiar with this. They've done this for years, right? Mm-hmm. You look at large enterprises I've worked with in the past with multiple locations and applications and data centers. They've done this. They've had the network security groups and teams to do that. But for the smaller enterprises, the mid caps out there, they don't have the large teams necessarily do that. So this is a little bit of a new area for them. Have they locked down their network? The other piece is on the services, or what are the services you might have people buying or putting on machines. A good example, and this has been one that's been out there a few times, is people buy a go to my PC type service. They put it on their machines because they want remote access from home. It's been approved. It's being used, but all of a sudden that person loses their credentials to their go to my PC service. And it's out there. Well, effectively, you've created a hole right into your back of your network because somebody's using this service. Wow. The other aspect is on that, somebody's bought a service in a certain department, and now you have the service has been purchased, and where are those credentials? Where is that account management being done? That person leaves, this is a critical service to the business, and nobody knows how to access it to it. So where is it at? They're going to come back to IT. Mm-hmm. IT is going to basically be the guys who are going to say, we need to get access to this service. IT is like, I don't know where it's at. So you're going to be scouring email. So hopefully you have a good discovery process to find that. And hopefully, you're able to get the credentials. Additionally, you might have bought a service and they bought a service for a year, They've left. The credit card comes time to renew. Nobody knows they can't access, and all of a sudden some things get shut down. These are all things that have happened for key use out there, people out there. So really having the ability to monitor and audit what's going on in your network becomes very important. Being able to see what traffic's flowing in, what traffic's flowing out, where things are going for that. Malware continues to rise, continues to increase. Being able to see, are people going to certain places? Has a cloud provider had their solution compromised with an incriminating payload? Those types of things for that. For those pieces. So that's probably a big area. The other area, probably the biggest threat for security, is oversharing, maintaining access to your information and control. With the cloud, a lot of these services, it's easy to share stuff. So, hey, I'm going to give you a link. Hey, Shelly, here's the link to access this file. And it's a link with no username, password, or expiration on it. You have access to this data that I've given you now, and you were with company A. Now you go to company B, as an example, and you saved all your links that you had. You're now at another company and potentially have access to data that you shouldn't even have access to anymore.
Right.
And I don't know, because we're not auditing that, or we're not tracking that. So those are things to think about of how you get to that. So those, security is big.
Right.
And finally, the biggest piece is disaster and recovery. What's your plan to get stuff back? Right, that's probably the biggest area in security, and that kind of wraps it all together. Is if a cloud provider has an issue, if they go out of business, if they have a change, how do you get your data back? What is your solution to basically have your data back, either in some readable form? It's not overly encrypted, right, or a proprietary format. You need to have it in some way that you could actually load it. And what's your comfort level with how far out you want that? Do you, hey, let me just have the last year's numbers, let me have the last quarter's numbers, last quarter's records, those types of things. And you have to decide what those recovery points are for you, so you can continue running your business.
Okay. So you talk about encryption. Who holds the keys to encryption?
That's a big one. Ideally, you should theoretically hold the keys if you can. You need to own your certs. You need to know where your certs are and where your certificates are going for that. With that, So
around disaster recovery that you had just brought up, backups are a big one that a lot of customers do. Do all the clouds provide backups?
Pretty much all the clouds provide some level of DR. All the cloud solutions are designed for DR. They're all designed for high availability because of their business models. I don't think anybody is out there. You don't have these cloud providers are not out there sitting in a closet, running a server, hidden in the basement, in mom's basement. You go back to the 90s for that when some of this stuff all got started. But the thing is you might have, if you've got terabytes of data out there in the cloud and you want to recover to a certain point, it may take you a while to restore terabytes of data to bare steel or even warm steel that may be out there. Understanding what the backups are, how they're being done. The cloud providers are out there. Most of them they're using real products to do backups. They're using the Commvaults. They're using the Semantics. They're using Veeam. They're using Double Take. They're using real applications to run their business. Right? They're not running those types of things. But the big piece is they're dealing with a lot of data. So how do you make sure you're at the front of the queue to get restored first?
Right. Disaster recovery plan is definitely key for a business.
Yes.
Right. So all that information was great, Jeremy, and we appreciate that. So just kind of want to touch on, there may be a few people watching this who are wishing they would have heard this before jumping into the cloud with both feet. How can those who are already in the cloud use this advice?
So with cloud, enterprise gave tremendous value. So I know I kind of threw some doom and gloom out there. It's not doom and gloom. It's an important piece I want to make sure people know. You can get a tremendous opportunity to leverage things in the cloud. Huge. Enterprises get access to services and capabilities that may not have been out of their reach that they couldn't have afforded. You think of a full-size security stack of data loss protection, malware detection, next generation firewalls, web application firewalls, all that. It's over $100K in equipment to kind of buy all that, plus the expertise to set it up and run it. Wow. Most enterprises, they're not going to go for that, right? So being able to partner with a cloud provider to get those kinds of services is huge, right? For that. The next area is, really you get the opportunity to leverage what you need when you need it, right? So you don't have to buy for that 400,000 user surge in your capacity when most of the year you're maybe only running 100,000 users, as an example. And that's big numbers for enterprise, but the scaling there. You only have to buy what you need when you need it, and the cloud provider can help you scale up and scale down. They can work with you on that. It's not going to be on-demand magic, scale up and scale down, I'll be honest, because they have their own planning pieces. But if they know that, hey, in Q4 is our big quarter, ramp this up, they can work with you to plan that and plan your spend and your budget to adjust that for that. The big thing about the cloud is it doesn't diminish the core responsibilities of the IT department, which is basically guarantee access to the data and guarantee the integrity of the data. That's probably the two big things that an IT department has to do. And even if the line of business has gone out there and picked an application, you as the IT department are responsible for that. Mm-hmm. You own that. That's where, why did you have to make that collaboration with that department to go and say, hey, let me help you get this to where it needs to be for the enterprise. Help them understand the risk, understand the options, and help them get a roadmap to get it upgraded or get the components in place to fit into your enterprise. It doesn't displace the best practices that enterprises have put in place. Version control, release management, change management, risk assessments. All the leading enterprises, these big enterprises who pioneered things like ITIL, COBIT, if you want to go back in time, all are key things to do to running a business. And the cloud providers are doing them. Mm-hmm. They're following those things. They're following those standards. They're building to, they're pursuing ISO certifications. Those types of things. That doesn't take you as the enterprise off the hook for basically being able to support that and deal with that. You really have to make sure that you're fitting in there, and you still have to do stuff. You don't get to wash your hands of your own security, your own risk management, your own data integrity.
Right.
Probably the biggest thing, and we'll leave with this, is for enterprises, you need to really keep the big picture view of how these services fit into your enterprise architecture. And it's going to change. It's going to change fast, so you need to plan for change for that. You need to know which services are critical to your operation and what they mean. And you need to spend some time to think about and work with your cloud providers on that. A lot of them will work with you. They're interested to do that. On what's your they're your primary, but what's your alternate plan? What's your contingent plan? Your emergency plan? Mm-hmm. Just like going to work in the morning. If your car doesn't work, this is how your next two things down are. Mm-hmm. So you got to think through that. So you can, it's a dynamic world. You got to adapt to it, and it's going to change.
Right. So as we've discussed, the cloud can be a huge asset to any enterprise, but there are some landmines that you need to navigate around. We have a few minutes left to take any questions. If we do not get to yours, or if you think of something you'd like to ask us later, please feel free to contact us at sales@uscloud.com.